November 3rd, 2025, 3 a.m., Pacific Ocean, 200 miles southwest of Hawaii. The Russian nuclear submarine K-549, Prince Vladimir, a Bore, a class vessel worth $890 million, feigned a scientific patrol. In truth, it was a direct threat aimed at Washington, a carefully calculated move to demand respect after the harsh economic sanctions imposed by the United States. It carried enough firepower to wipe out 60 cities in less than 5 minutes. Seconds later, 6 R-30 Bulava M missiles were launched. Each missile carried a 100-kiloton thermonuclear warhead streaking toward Hawaii. Their target? The U.S. Navy Logistics Command at Pearl Harbor, a critical node that, if destroyed, could cripple U.S. naval operations in the Pacific for months. Immediately, the United States launched Operation Iron Storm. 1 EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft and 3 F-35A Lightning II fighters took off, armed with 15 AGM-158C LRASM cruise missiles. Their mission? Strike the Vladivostok naval base, the crown jewel of the Russian Pacific Fleet. Would the U.S. be able to stop the incoming strike? Or would those warheads turn Hawaii to ashes? Let's find out. November 3rd, 2025. 3 a.m., Pacific Ocean. 200 miles southwest of Hawaii, the sea was perfectly still. A silver mirror reflecting on a black surface plunging 4,000 meters deep. Far below, Russia's nuclear submarine K-549 Knyaz Vladimir, a Bore A-class vessel valued at $890 million, drifted quietly at a depth of 125 meters. Inside the pressure hull, 16,000 tons of steel surrounded 6 R-30 Bulava M nuclear missiles, each capable of carrying 10 100-kiloton warheads, enough firepower to erase 60 cities in less than 5 minutes. For 9 days, the submarine had remained invisible to every U.S. satellite and sonar buoy, moving no faster than 6 nautical miles per hour, pretending to be on a research patrol. But that was not the truth. In reality, it was the centerpiece of Operation Northern Spear, a plan approved by Moscow on October 2, 2025, designed not to start a war, but to sow fear in Washington and force respect after the severe economic sanctions imposed by the United States. Inside the steel hull, 142 crew members lived in absolute silence. The external pressure exceeded 5,000 pounds per square inch, enough to crush a man instantly. Red lights blinked on the control panels. The air was thick with the scent of iron and oil. The captain, a 42-year-old veteran from Murmansk, stared at the digital clock. 8:45 Moscow time. An encrypted command arrived. Prepare for test launch. Target, Hawaiian perimeter. 6 words that could change history. The order meant a real nuclear test, just 480 miles from U.S. territory. The boldest move since the Cold War. Above them, the Pacific glimmered under sunlight. Passenger planes crossed the sky. Honolulu fishermen sailed out, unaware. No one knew that beneath them lay a submarine armed with 6 warheads capable of unleashing energy 1,200 times greater than Hiroshima. The coordinates were already calculated. Latitude 20.8 degrees north, longitude 156.3 degrees west. This was not aimed at a battlefield, but at a message. At 9 a.m. Hawaii time, when the command channel turned green, the silence of the ocean would be shattered, and the United States would face the closest nuclear shadow it had seen in more than 60 years. 9:45 a.m., off the coast of Oahu, Hawaii. The morning sun shimmered over Pearl Harbor. The air was calm and still. Beneath that stillness, danger was waiting. At the U.S. Navy Logistics Command, more than 1,200 sailors had just begun their shifts. Technicians were repairing the AN/SPY-6 radar array, a $240 million system designed to detect threats over 1,500 miles away, which had been offline for 48 hours due to a minor software synchronization error. 2 backup sensors had failed at 2:17 a.m., leaving the entire Hawaiian perimeter blind. No alarm, no warning, no eyes watching the horizon. At 9:52 a.m., Petty Officer Elias Ward, 27, noticed a faint pulse on the backup screen. Rhythmic, low-frequency echoes coming from the southwest, 210 nautical miles away. He logged it, reported it, and received the response. Probably atmospheric interference. That was the last warning anyone would hear. 9 miles off the coast, the Russian submarine K-549 Knyaz Vladimir hovered at a depth of 90 meters, carrying 6 R-30 Bulava M nuclear missiles. It began ascending from 125 meters to 91 meters as the launch tubes opened one by one. Red lights flashed inside the control room. The captain gave the order. "It's time, launch." At 10:02 a.m., 6 R-30 Bulava M missiles erupted from the depths, tearing through the ocean's surface with 800 tons of pressure per square inch, streaking toward Oahu at Mach 6.9. Each carried a 100 kiloton thermonuclear warhead, 10 times the power of Hiroshima. At that moment, the base's Patriot PAC-3 defense system detected the signal. Operators quickly spotted the submarine-launched missiles on the backup screen and launched 15 interceptors. 5 were destroyed, but 2 broke through. The first warhead detonated above the fuel depot, unleashing a storm of fire and molten steel. 3.8 million liters of jet fuel erupted into a 67-kilometer fireball, sending a column of smoke rising 960 meters into the sky. The ground convulsed as hangars crumpled like paper, and 6,200 windows across the harbor shattered in a single deafening wave. 4 seconds later, the second missile struck the main power plant. The entire western grid was plunged into darkness. Heat tore through the runways, steel melted into rivers. Within minutes, 17 were dead, 320 injured, and 89 burned beyond recognition. Damages exceeded $6.3 billion, a quarter of Hawaii's GDP. From orbit, satellites captured a crimson wound spreading across Oahu. The Pacific was no longer blue, it was burning red. And somewhere deep beneath that ocean, the submarine that caused the catastrophe slipped back into silence. What will America do after Russia fires 2 missiles straight into its heart? Retaliate or negotiate? Share your thoughts in the comments below. 10:25 a.m., Washington, D.C. Inside the Situation Room, every voice fell silent. Screens glowed red with satellite images of Oahu, hangars aflame, fuel tanks burning like the sun, and a smoke column 6 miles high. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff rose, his face stone cold, and spoke 3 words that could ignite another front. Authorize immediate retaliation. 10:27 a.m. Operation Iron Tempest was born. Within minutes, encrypted orders echoed like thunder across the Pacific. Aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford, the U.S. Navy's $13 billion flagship operating in the Eastern Sea of Japan, commands rippled through every deck. Crew members rushed back to their stations as 4 aircraft rolled onto the flight deck. 1 EA-18G Growler for electronic warfare, and 3 F-35A Lightning II fighters armed with 15 AGM-158 CLRASM long-range anti-ship cruise missiles. 10:46 a.m. Engines roar. The formation punched through the blue to 41,000 feet, heading west at Mach 0.92. Their target, the Vladivostok Naval Base, 1,025 kilometers away, the crown jewel of the Russian Pacific Fleet. Beneath those granite cliffs sat 4 Borei-A nuclear submarines, 2 Yasin-M attack submarines, the missile cruiser Varyag, and more than 6,000 naval personnel. In Washington, commanders watched radar arcs converge like drawn-out blades. On the USS Gerald R. Ford, the flight deck shook as afterburners tore through the sky. For the first time in half a century, American attack aircraft were no longer on the defensive. They were predators. And somewhere over the endless ocean, 4 dark shapes cut through the clouds, silent, swift, and inevitable. The war had moved ashore, and the countdown to retaliation had begun. Stay with me, because what happens next over Vladivostok will change everything you thought you knew about modern warfare. 4:55 p.m. Zavostok time. The city rested under a low, gray sky. In the harbor, the Russian Pacific Fleet shimmered under the fog. 4 Borei-A nuclear submarines, 2 Yasin-M attack subs, the missile cruiser Varyag, and nearly 6,000 personnel stationed across dry docks and underground bunkers. For decades, this place had been called the Iron Fortress of the East. That illusion was about to die. At 5:01 p.m., radar operators at Fleet Command noticed static crawling across their screens. Then the images fractured. Dozens of phantom aircraft appeared, moving at impossible speeds. The Air Defense Commander shouted, "Electronic interference!" It was already too late. 21 seconds earlier, high above the Sea of Japan, the EA-18G Growler had unleashed its ALQ-249 next-gen jamming pods, flooding the spectrum with 600 megawatts of signal noise, blinding every Russian radar in a 120-mile radius. 5:03 p.m. 3 F-35 broke formation, descending from 41,000 feet at Mach 1.2. 15 AGM-158 CLRASM missiles dropped from their wings, hugging the waves at 200 feet altitude. Each missile carried 450 kilograms of high-explosive tungsten, intelligent, self-steering, and nearly unstoppable. The Russian S-400 defense grid came alive, firing 12 interceptors, each worth $9 million. Only 5 hit their targets. The rest tore through the fog, closing on Vladivostok at over 680 miles per hour. 5:05 p.m. The first strike slammed into Dry Dock 2, where a Yasin M submarine was undergoing refit. The explosion vaporized 200 tons of steel, launching fragments a quarter mile into the air. 11 seconds later, a second missile hit the fuel storage depot, igniting 72,000 gallons of diesel, turning the harbor into a burning lake. 5:06:14 p.m. 5 more missiles struck the submarine pen carved into Mount Klenovaya. The concrete roof, 6 meters thick, cracked like glass. Underground torpedo magazines detonated, creating a chain reaction that triggered 13 secondary explosions. Flames climbed 1,800 feet high, visible all the way to Nakodka, 70 kilometers away. By 5:09 p.m., the Growler disengaged. Its jammers burned out. The sky glowed orange. Ships burned at their moorings. 1,850 Russian sailors were killed or wounded, and 3 submarines sank where they rested. From orbit, satellites captured the inferno. Vladivostok's coastline ablaze, a red wound spreading into the Pacific. In Washington, the Pentagon's response was brief, cold, and final. Target neutralized. Deterrence restored. But the world knew better. Deterrence was gone, and the fire had only just begun. 6:30 p.m., November 3rd, 2025, Pacific Command, Pearl Harbor. The fires on Oahu had turned to embers, yet the horizon still glowed red. Across the world in Vladivostok, the sea burned black. In just 9 hours, 2 strikes, one Russian, one American, had shattered nearly $38 billion in military infrastructure and left more than 1,200 people dead on both sides. For the first time since 1962, the world had watched nuclear-capable powers trade blows and survive. In Hawaii, the scale of destruction was staggering. 17 killed, 320 wounded, and 3.8 million liters of fuel gone in seconds. Nearly 2,000 homes around Pearl Harbor lost power. Civilian flights were grounded as a toxic plume carrying 12,000 tons of ash drifted toward Honolulu. Hospitals overflowed with burn victims. Rescue helicopters flew non-stop through the smoke. Half a world away, Vladivostok was silent except for the sound of steel collapsing. 850 Russian sailors were confirmed dead or missing. The missile cruiser Varyag lay half-submerged, her hull cracked in 2. The flames had consumed 72,000 gallons of fuel, and the shockwave registered 3.2 on the Richter scale. Radiation monitors across Primorsky Krai recorded spikes from ruptured submarine reactors. Entire districts were evacuated as 2.3 million residents lost power. At 7:10 p.m. Washington time, the Pentagon released a single-line statement: "Retaliation complete, strategic stability restored." But there was no stability, only silence. Stock markets plunged 2,400 points within an hour. Crude oil prices spiked 18% overnight, and defense alerts went to level DEFCON 3. Across NATO, early warning satellites were repositioned. In Beijing, state media aired 5 minutes of static. a symbol, some said, of dread. In Kiev, Ukrainian engineers brought their damaged radar back online. One whispered, "The Pacific burned, and we felt it here." By midnight, two scars glowed on opposite ends of the Earth, one over Hawaii, one over Vladivostok, both visible from orbit. And as dawn approached, a grim truth settled across every capital. War no longer needed armies to begin. It only needed one blind minute. And the will to pull the triggers. November 4th, 2025. Dawn. The first light touched both ends of the Pacific, from the ruins of Pearl Harbor's burning coastline to the smoking piers of Vladivostok. Two nations, separated by half a world, now shared the same horizon of ash. The ocean that once carried trade, hope, and diplomacy had become a cemetery of pride. In Hawaii, rescue teams searched through twisted steel and molten concrete. The air still reeked of fuel. 3.8 million liters gone in a single breath. Survivors spoke of a blinding light that came without sound, only heat. It felt like the sky itself was falling, one sailor whispered. On the other side of the world, in Russia's Far East, charred hulls floated like tombstones. Families lined the docks in silence, watching smoke rise from what had been the heart of their navy. In Washington and Moscow, the war rooms went quiet. No victory speeches, no declarations, only the realization that $16 billion in firepower had bought nothing but fear. Analysts called it the first limited nuclear confrontation in modern history, but there was nothing limited about its impact. The Pacific trade routes froze. The global market lost $1.3 trillion in 24 hours. Every capital from Beijing to London recalculated the meaning of deterrence. When night returned, the waves rolled again. Calm, indifferent, eternal. The sea had swallowed the evidence, but not the memory. What began as a show of power had ended as a lesson carved in fire, that the ocean remembers, even when nations forget. And somewhere beneath those waters, a single sonar ping echoed back unanswered. A reminder that silence in this century no longer means peace. If you value this kind of analysis and want to keep uncovering the real lessons behind today's conflicts, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue bringing you the untold stories of modern warfare.
Yeah.